Eric Hall from PRE.
Thanks very much. Good morning, everyone. I am honored to be here with such innovative products and services that came before me here. I should admit, I'm actually filling in for our founder and managing director, Adam Etkin. Anyone who knows Adam knows that these are big shoes to fill, but I will do my best. Adam is actually speaking at another event today. So PRE, just to explain from the beginning, PRE is a suite of products designed to secure greater trust and transparency in peer review. We believe it to be the cornerstone of scholarly communication, and it faces some pretty significant challenges in today's publishing environment. Like most startups, PRE has taken quite a circuitous route to success. Here is a timeline for PRE. The idea was first conceived as PRE-Score by Adam Etkin, who was actually looking for a metric for evaluating the rigor of peer review. We have metrics for just about everything right now. Most of them are lagging indicators of quality. He was looking for a leading indicator of quality and thought PRE-Score might be able to fit the bill. He spent the next few years shaping the idea and consulting with anyone and everyone, many of you in this room, to improve upon it. The idea was actually bought by Striatis in 2014. Striatis is the parent company of the Journal of Bone and Joint Surgery journals. PRE does share resources with the Journal of Bone and Joint Surgery, but we maintain a very strict firewall operationally to ensure that we can preserve independence as PRE. Soon after the purchase of PRE, Adam began to see headlines like these with startling frequency. This is just a selection of some of the most recent scandals related to things like sophisticated identity fraud and peer review rings, publication of computer-generated or nonsense papers, proliferation of predatory publishers, which Stephen Beal touched on at length yesterday, and major lapses in editorial control. A good example of this is editors blindly using author-recommended reviewers or unqualified reviewers. These headlines, we believe, have led to an erosion of trust in peer review, and I think this trust is spilling over to affect the perception of scholarly publishing in general. We're seeing this play out in the mainstream press as well. Here are some clippings from more recent articles that appeared in the Huffington Post, Slate, and others. We hear this a lot. Peer review is broken. Peer review doesn't work. Peer review is ruining science. And we think that calls such as these effectively throw out the baby with the bathwater. What we know is, thanks to some recent surveys, is that the scholarly community still values peer review. So 84% who were surveyed believe that without peer review, there would be no control in scientific communication. 91 researchers believe that their last paper was improved as a result of peer review. But we also know that 2/3 of people surveyed believe that there's quite a lot of room for improvement. And we may know from our own experience that peer review is not always conducted according to best practices or even in compliance with the journal's own policy. Peer review means different things to different people. It sometimes means different things within the same journal, different papers depending on what section they appear in the journal, taking different paths through the peer review process. There's no way of differentiating one method from another at the article level. And with the explosion of online content, it's becoming increasingly difficult for users to determine what is peer-reviewed and what is not. So getting back to our timeline here, you'll see that shortly after purchase and having seen a lot of these scandals appear and through close consultation with a lot of experts in the field, Adam realized there was a more urgent and pressing need. And so he shifted his focus onto what we now call PRE-Val. So what is PRE-Val? In a nutshell, PRE-Val is the only service to provide independent third-party verification of the peer review process at both the journal and article level. PRE-Val leverages metadata directly from the manuscript tracking system, whether it be ScholarOne, Editorial Manager, eJournal Press, to do two things. The first is to simply confirm that a paper has undergone peer review in the manner advertised. This is not the publisher saying this. This is not the editor saying this. This is an independent third party verifying that this has indeed happened. The second thing Pre-Val does is it parses and displays information related to the peer review process for that specific article. Confirmation of that a paper was peer reviewed and the information is displayed via the Pre-Val badge, which you can see here. And I'm going to take my chances here at a live demo, not to be recommended for the faint of heart. And hopefully this will load soon. While this is loading, I'll just point out that one of the missions of Pre-Val is to open up what is often referred to as a black box of peer review. You submit your paper into a journal, some things happen behind the scenes, and a decision is rendered. But it's not always clear how that decision was reached, who was involved, and what measures were taken to ensure that the content was vetted with the appropriate level of rigor. So one of the first clients, as you would expect, for Pre-Val is the Journal of Bone and Joint Surgery. We are now on 3 of their journals. And here's an example of where they've chosen to place the Pre-Val badge. You can see it right here in the green. The badge can be placed really anywhere on a content page or a TOC page or an abstract page. It's essentially 3 lines of code, very small. And we've worked with Highwire to place this particular badge on this particular page. We can also alter the badge to fit with the style and the color scheme for that page to make it look as though it's actually coming from the publisher. So the badge provides a visual indicator that this paper has been peer-reviewed according to the journal policy, and the journal has committed to industry standards. And by clicking on the badge, the user can also access data related to the peer review process for this specific paper. So method of review, was it double-blind, was it single-blind? Just below that, you'll see a link to the journal's actual policies regarding peer review, so the user can actually compare. Rounds of review prior to acceptance. Was the article screened for plagiarism? On the right there, you'll see the people who were involved in the review of this specific paper. And we think this is really important, if for no other reason than to invite some transparency into the peer review process, allow the user to see all the hard work that goes into peer review. We know that reviewers and editors and associate editors are the unsung heroes of our industry. They do a hell of a lot of work and are not always recognized or acknowledged for it. This is one way of doing that while maintaining some anonymity. So if I can, I'm going to switch to the next link here. Bear with me. So the JBJS, Pre-Val was implemented in the JBJS sites in December of 2014, and we were just implemented on the American Diabetes Association journal pages in April of 2015, just earlier this month. So as you can see here, this is your sort of standard Highwire TOC page. And you won't see links to Pre-Val in the commentaries, obviously, because that is content that is not meant to be peer-reviewed. However, if you just page down a bit further here, you'll see that just below this article, the ADA has chosen not to use a badge, but to use a text link. We're fine either way. We just want to fit in with the style and scheme of that particular content page. Again, by clicking on the Pre-Val badge, we pull up the Pre-Val pop-up window, which can be branded according to the publisher's wishes. And once again, here we see information related to the specific journey this particular paper took prior to publication. And if you look at the bottom there, you'll also see a few logos. So these logos are meant to reassure the user that this particular journal adheres to the policies of COPE, is a signatory to COPE, is a member of good standing with the STM Association, if that's the case, that this journal is actually included in PubMed, and this journal is sponsoring and advocating collection of ORCID IDs. We're currently working with ORCID at the moment in the hope of trying to bust up some of these peer review rings. One of the things we'd like to do is for those journals that now require ORCID IDs from reviewers or even authors, that is part of the metadata that comes to us when an article is accepted. What we then do is we'll ping the ORCID server from our server and essentially ask ORCID, does this information that we've been supplied match up to what you have in your own database? If there's a difference, we can flag that up and alert the publisher that there may be a problem. It could be perfectly legitimate, but we want to make sure the publisher, in the first instance, is aware that there may be potential fraud here. One other thing I'd like to point out here is we seem to be entering this phase where publishers are sort of forced to choose between two extremes, either maintaining this traditional black box of peer review where the paper goes in, some things happen, and a decision is rendered, or the other extreme, which is open review, however you want to define that. We think that the level of openness really needs to be up to the publisher, the editor, and the community at large, the community that that publisher or that journal is trying to serve. And we think Pre-Val is a really good way of allowing publishers to find their own level of openness without being forced into one of these two extremes. I'll give you just one last demo, if I might. This one is not live, but I wanted to show you for those publishers that want to begin to share reviewer details and reviewer information, that's something that we can facilitate. So here's another Pre-Val pop-up box, provides the usual detail about the journey this paper took prior to publication. However, there's one difference at the very bottom here, and that is this downward arrow. So for those journals that do want to share reviewer commentary, reviewer names, we can facilitate that. By clicking on the down arrow and paging down, you can begin to see dummy text, but hopefully this will give you an idea of what it might look like. So reviewer 1, that could be the reviewer's name if they want to choose, if the publisher chooses to do that, or they can keep it anonymous and just name them reviewer 1. The reviewer commentary can be shared here as well, but again, this is entirely up to the publisher. We are not in the business of dictating workflow or even peer review standards for that matter, or how open any publisher should be. Our job is to service all publishers, whatever their workflow, whatever their policies may be. Just to be clear, we know how important data is to publishers. So our policy, and this is written into our publishing contracts, is that if a publisher does not want to share the information in the actual pop-up window, we won't even store it. And that is to avoid any security breaches from happening. So getting back to our timeline here, we've now launched with the ADA, and we're looking forward to an exciting future. We think Pre-Val is a great service in its own right, but it's just the beginning. And as you can imagine, there's quite a lot of things we might actually be able to bolt on to this service. So the first thing that we're looking forward to is working with our expert advisory board, and it's really just, we're honored to have so many influential people involved. We've got Rebecca Bryant, former director of community at ORCID, Josh Greenberg, who is director of the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation's Digital Information Technology Program, Judy Luther, president of Informed Strategies, Ivan Oransky with Retraction Watch, Howard Ratner with Chorus. We are really honored to have such illustrious people on our editorial advisory board. They're going to be guiding us as we make decisions that infect the scholarly community, and they're going to help us stay attuned to the needs of each of the scholarly communities. We're going to continue to work with ORCID to combat identity theft and peer review rings. We think this is a very serious problem that all of us should be concerned about, and hopefully we'll have some success in that area. We are hoping to collaborate with Sense About Science and others to improve education and training. I think we're hearing a lot about how there is quite a tangible need for greater training amongst reviewers. We're all using different criteria to evaluate papers. Maybe that's good, maybe not. So that's something that we're looking forward to promoting. We also think we might have a role in validating peer reviewer activity for deans and tenure boards. So personally, I think it's just a matter of time before faculty begin to actually be recognized for all the reviewer activity they do. It takes a tremendous amount of work and time, and it seems to be getting it seems to be getting worse. There's more things to review and less reviewers to do the work. So I think it's just a matter of time before reviewers begin to be recognized for this work, and deans and tenure boards and other bodies need to go somewhere to validate what a faculty member is telling them that they did. Maybe PRE has a role there. We're currently working with PEER. I'm not sure how familiar you all are with PEER. They are the first multinational government-funded effort to understand more about peer review. I say this a lot, that the one system we use to validate scientific information is neither scientific nor is it very well understood. PEER is really trying to get to the heart of the matter. They've got a great collection of scholars. That's actually where Adam Etkin is at the moment presenting, to try to look at what works and what doesn't in peer review, what are true threats, what may be imagined threats, and how can we optimize peer review for the 21st century. What I really hope comes out of PEER's work, and we're happy to help in any way that we can, is a minimum standard of peer review. It's been 350 years now, and we still don't have this. It might be a good idea for us to look. And this might be a minimum standard on a subject level. It might be a minimum standard for a publisher, hopefully for all publishers. But we think it's high time that one be established at some point. The minute it is and it's accepted by the wider scholarly community, we will be sure to integrate that into our product as well. And finally, the idea of pre-score has not gone away. We think that there may be utility in a metric devoted to the rigor of peer review, but it's going to require quite a lot more R&D, and we're looking forward to working with our partners as well as our early adopters to try to flesh this out over time and see if it's something that we can experiment with down the road. So that's the end of my time. I want to thank you very much on behalf of myself and Adam Etkin, and I'm happy to take any questions that you have. Thank you.
Fantastic.